Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be going over the, what is this, live letter 87? Yeah, live letter 87. I forgot. I don't even have the Roman numerals in front of me right now, so. Oh, it says it right there. Look, little tiny. I see 87. I don't even need the Roman numerals in the bottom right there. This live letter is going to be a somewhat divisive one, depending on what side of the aisle you're on content-wise. I think we're going to have, it's going to be explosive, I feel like, because there are some new things coming. But there's some things that people were hoping for that aren't there. And also just kind of question marks about when certain things are coming overall. So without further ado, let's just get into it because we have a lot to cover. First of all, the patch artwork and the name, The Promise of Tomorrow, patch 7.3. You've got all the essential characters. I like Sphene having the book right there, which everybody pointed out pretty much immediately. And then a gun. Just, gun. So this is the finale of the Dawn Trail story. For those who are unfamiliar, most expansion stories, other than A Realm Reborn and Endwalker, they kind of begin in the 0.0 patch and end by the 0.3 patch. And then 0.4 and 0.5 are used to set up for the next expansion, using elements of like the characters and stuff that was still leading up to the 7.3. So probably still going to see Erenville, Wuk-Lamat, like Galulja. We'll probably still see them throughout 0.4 and 0.5. But whatever's happening there is setting up 8.0. And what we'll be dealing with there. That's just a completely normal thing for the majority of the expansions that we've had, and that will be the case here. They told us it would be this way a while ago as well, so this is not a surprise. Obviously, not everyone keeps up like that, but it just is how it is. Now, they did give us basically the release date of the patch, and it is right on schedule. For those who also don't know, there's 19 weeks between major patches, so whenever a patch comes out, just add 19 weeks to the next major patch, and 90% of the time, that will be correct. Early August is the big hard confirmation. Japan breaks its scheduling down into thirds. The first 10 days is early, the second 10 days is middle, and then the last several days, 8, 10, 11 of the month is all late. Early August, there's only one Tuesday in early August, August 5th. So that's pretty much hard confirmation, which fits the 19-week schedule that we were expecting. The illustration's also by the Final Fantasy IX character designer, which is worth mentioning as well. We have a few basic screenshots of the story. Not much you can really take away from it here. Just, a picture with Sphene and Cryle. A picture with this kind of malfunctioning bot in the main story. And then we have a picture of Erenville and someone with a purple regulator. Kind of hard to tell, but it almost looks as if they are actually in living memory. And given some of the other screenshots that we see in the dungeon, I mean, we're definitely going back to living memory. Like, we know we're going back to living memory, but the question is everyone else coming with us? We also have our picture of Calyx here, who is, of course, twirling his pen around like a jerk, as he tends to do. So it is what it is. Before I get any further, by the way, this is the Reddit translation. This is an unofficial translation by Iluna Minori and Miyuna. They do all of the unofficial translations that I usually reference on the Final Fantasy XIV subreddit's Discord. So that's where all this information, all these screenshots, that's where they're all being taken from. We know our allied society, as most people predicted, it will be the Yaqui. These will be the crafter ones. We had battle, we had gathering, now we get crafting. And let me tell you, he is looking fabulous in that outfit right there. Definitely digging what he's got going on in the batch. It looks like we're rebuilding some constructs. We also have the first dungeon boss from the level 93 dungeon making a return with their subjects as well. So I wonder if they'll be involved in any capacity. If they're the minion, the mount, I'd assume this golem would be the mount, but we'll just have to wait and see. It's a better look. Looks like we're going up the mountain a little bit as well into all of their little crafting nooks and crannies that we have. Because the snow is higher up. So I'm assuming this is like its own separate little instance that's accessed maybe from an NPC in the Yaqui town. That's what I'm expecting at the very least. Of course, we have the continuation of Hildibrand, or Detective Hardboiled in this particular case. Yeah, no surprises there. Even going back to Shelloni and having what looks to be a fun little time there as well. Curious to see where it goes. I haven't even actually caught up with the most recent one because I was spending all my time in the Occult Crescent. Next, we have the dungeon, the Meso Terminal. Like I said, obviously, we are going back to living memory. So we're going to the Meso Terminal that was there as well, kind of back there. And it looks activated is the interesting thing. So Calyx's plans, well in motion, one would say. We also get a look at some of Calyx's other memories. If I'm not mistaken, this is Treno specifically. Seeing the night lamps here and seeing the kind of destroyed aspects of it. This is See, I remember when I saw this, I couldn't remember exactly where it was, but this is, where is it? How do I describe it? Right outside. See, how I describe it is rough, because I know there's a Zodiac stone at the top left behind that thing, if I'm remembering exactly where it is in Treno. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is Treno in Final Fantasy IX, but I thought this is Ruby's Theater. Does it really look like... No, it's not Ruby's Theater. I'm pretty sure it's that shop that's like outside of where you end up going to start the heist section of the Treno missions. It's literally like on that last screen that where Marcus walks in and rejoins with the crew. But yeah, it's near the inn where you meet Baku. Right, that's where it is. The item shop. So yeah, there's that dungeon part of the MSQ. And then we see this. So they're not telling us who the trial is. But those rings are Necron's rings. Like the actual figure here is nothing like Necron from Final Fantasy IX, and Necron is my #1 prediction. But all the rings and the symbol, like those all scream Necron. So I am assuming not Necron, similar to how we had not Beatrix, is probably going to be the boss, but expect like Grand Cross and whatever other mechanics that they feel like throwing in there to make a return. They won't talk about the trial, though. They won't be able to show any of that. They're going to keep it a secret the whole time. We'll probably be able to figure it out from the trailer and the Part 2 live letter. It's so funny how many people didn't recognize this immediately. This is Sandoria. This is for the Final Fantasy XI raid. We have 2 of our locations and a teaser of where the last one probably is. So we have Sandoria. This is up by the fountain in northern Sandoria, leading to the chateau. It's called Sandoria, the second walk, obviously. And we also see Busadine Glacier leading into Fei Yin. I briefly questioned if this was perhaps Kufim Island and this was Delkfoot Tower, which given the next screenshot would have made a lot of sense. But they're kind of similar-ish, but this looks more like Fei Yin to me. That looks more like Fei Yin. This looks more like Busadine Glacier. The dead tree does actually kind of remind me of Kufim as well. But it's one of the two. I think it's Busadine Glacier. Just makes the most sense to me as well. Then we have a screenshot that basically confirms something I already knew. Most people will see our good old buddy Surreal Jaw there. And by good old buddy, I mean we hate that guy. But people are wondering who he's looking at. Final Fantasy XI players recognize that shoulder armor. That is Camlanot, one of the 2 main antagonists of the Rise of Xylard expansion, and one of my predictions for the boss. The other would be his older brother, Aelnark, who is basically the final boss of the Rise of Xylard expansion. They're the 2 brothers that are part of it. And at the end of the first raid, Surreal Jaw made it seem like he wanted to give each of Galul Jajah's like Phantom's heads their own body. At least that's how I interpreted it. And so they needed 2 strong leaders in order to do that. And the 2 remaining Xylardian brothers who were in charge of Juno for the early parts of the game just makes the most sense. So they're going with exactly what I expected. That's why I had to question if this was Kufim, because going to Delkfoot Tower and then maybe Velugan and Palace makes a lot of sense. But it would also be it'd be a more linear raid. Like the first raid, we kind of hopped all over the place. This one would be a little more direct. Sandoria is also closer to Busadine Glacier, but given the way they did the first raid, again, I think that's a completely irrelevant point. So yeah, at the very least, I expect Camlanot and Aelnark to make up 2 of the 4 bosses. For Sandoria itself, which will probably have its own boss before we hop away, they could do an Orcish King if they really wanted to. They could do, there's a few things they could do. It's probably not going to be Prish again, one would assume, or Surreal Jaw himself. So there's a few things that they could do in there, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just like the Orcish King or something like that. And then we have a few more screenshots here as well. Just, one more screenshot of our protagonist, Prish, and that guy whose name I have forgotten. I was going to just call him Adventurer, but he does have a name. Then Seiryu, the next Unreal. No surprises there. I'm expecting this to be a decent bit easier for most people than Suzaku. There is 1 or 2 mechanics I'm worried about, but I also just wonder if the scaling on this will be similar-ish to Suzaku or more like Byaku's, because Suzaku has been giving a lot of people some headaches. Even though it's gotten better and better, still a lot of headaches. Then we had this. I thought this was the deep dungeon because it looks like nothing else in the game. It is our new treasure dungeon, Vault Onerin. So they had mentioned in early Dawn Trail wanting to do something that wasn't the roulette wheel. and doing something new. It looks to me like slots, because I'm assuming each of those heads will roll a symbol, and you want to get 3 of a symbol in a row in order to trigger whatever the boss is. A 777 or a jackpot, of course, being the kind of silver-esque equivalent, the maximum result. And then having the usual, you know, like 1 symbol, 2 symbol, 3 symbol for the easy, medium, hard, similar to the roulette wheel. And then the bonus round, which, you know, if you've played a slot machine, you know what the bonus round. The fake outs are probably going to be really cool, but literally full-blown Gamba mode. Really looking forward to this. I'm a huge fan of treasure dungeons. I haven't done that many because I've kind of gotten tired of doing the current ones over and over again. I actually much prefer doing the roulette wheel over the doors personally, especially. So having a brand new one means I'll probably be going back to doing some map parties a little bit more frequently because it's fun little side content, and I usually make a decent amount of guild doing it. They also showed us a Daft Dragora. That is the blingiest Mandragora, and if it's not a mount, you have made a terrible mistake, Final Fantasy XIV devs, because people will pay out the wazoo for that as a mount. So you better make it happen. There's some new mini games in the treasure dungeons. Now, they say they have new mini games. I don't know if they're referring to the overall treasure dungeon game, which again appears to be slots, or if they're referring to like the high-low games versus like the Mandragoras spawning all over. I wonder if those are different as well. And honestly, they probably should be. So I'm excited. That's something I'm definitely excited for. Duty support's getting Cutter's Cry. We knew that already. PvP Series 9 is beginning. Some PvP action adjustments, no surprise there. And a new Crystalline Conflict arena. Looks like Tuliolol is going to be a battleground once again, because that is where the new arena is. And it looks great. Personally, it gives me Palestra vibes. It's got the very narrow side lanes, and it's generally a pretty narrow map. There's a couple of jump pads, and we weren't teased on any sort of environmental hazards, but they could be there. We just weren't really teased on any of it. They would probably save that for the Part 2 live letter. Now, that's not the only thing. PvP is also getting another major update in the form of 2 more rankings for Crystalline Conflict. Now, once you've reached the Crystal tier, you can additionally climb up to the Omega and Ultima tiers. They did not detail any of the rewards or any of the adjustments. They're going to save that for the Part 2 live letter. But as somebody who got Crystal Season 1 and then never did it again, I am mildly tempted to go back and get Omega and Ultima rankings for the next patch, because now those are new borders that I've never had before. And while I don't think that's a solution to the problem they have of like a lot of people getting Crystal and then feeling like they just don't want to go back to it, there needs to be a fundamental reward like restructuring of those, especially of the higher ranks, I feel, because the glowy weapons and the tokens for them are quite frankly not enough. That being said, it is going to more directly encourage people to keep queuing after Crystal, but then you just run into the same problem at Ultima and even into Omega. The number of people that are going to be queuing past Crystal is probably not very high, but I think that's what they're trying to do, is to maintain some more interest of climbing between Platinum and Crystal as a whole. I just don't know if it's going to work. I'm not too optimistic about that, but it is cool to have them, and I am kind of tempted to try to get to Omega or Ultima so I could get those extra borders. Now, actually, I did skip some things, and I'm going to come back to them at the end. I did kind of start midway into the live letter, and seeing the moon right here, it's reminding me. But I know a lot of you want to get to the new stuff first, so we're going to jump back after I do all of the announcements, and then we'll go back to the actual first half of the live letter that I had actually completely forgotten about because I was just thinking about all the new stuff, even though I was talking about it right before we started. But anyway, next we have the Cosmic Exploration. Again, there's feedback to that in the first half. But we are going to be going to our new planet in that of either Faina or Fianna. I think they said Fianna on the stream. As you can see, it's very bright. It's very blue sky atmosphere. Very plant life heavy. More sponge, I would assume. And yeah, other than that, I mean, we kind of know bits and bobs about what to expect from it. You know, more enhancement tools, new rewards, and of course the star contributor, which earlier they did say would be available right from the start. It was kind of weird not having it right from the start on the moon, and that was part of the feedback that they covered in the first half. And in fact, they reiterate it right here. Then we have the Relic grind. We will be getting Phantom Weapon upgrades, even though Occult Crescent will not have a major content added to it. Now, they are making adjustments to Occult Crescent, which again, we will go back to. It was in the first half of the live letter, and I'm sticking to the second half here first. Now, the fact that the Warrior of Light starts their Relic and is depressed means it's probably not tomes immediately. Now, my personal fear is that it is going to be a one-time step followed by only tomes. I cannot state this enough. Tomes as an option is always great. I would just like more options that are not only tomes. I don't know why that's so controversial, but people are stupid. I have to say it. I don't know why having an additional option for this has always become such a contested point. It makes no sense to me. Trying to make it easier for everyone. That being said, with that disappointment, I am assuming a light grind. It could be books. I don't think it'll be books. I'm assuming a light grind. What light is, it's basically by completing objectives, you gain a certain amount of light. And the amount of light you gain, it's a mix of certain different types of content give you more or less light, generally based on the amount of times. Like alliance rates are usually pretty high on a one-time completion. And then there's usually individual instances that are in bonus, meaning that if you are for a short period of time, they're worth more. So you can generally spam them. Doing light farming is a mix of either choosing to grind something that is really efficient or casually doing it as you play. Honestly, not unlike a tome grind, but with that alternate thing where you're kind of doing both at the same time, in a sense. You can earn tomes and earn light, and they don't overlap with each other in any capacity. And that's been a relatively successful step. We haven't had a light grind since Pyros, and that one wasn't even mandatory. It was just for stats. So I'm hoping that it is a largely light-based step. And I think that they need to, if they really want to modernize it, the problem with light-based steps prior is you needed to be on the job. I think we are in the modern day where you don't need to be on the job to earn it. So I think they just need to give you a kettle of some kind that charges in any content that you do on any job. And that would probably be a sufficient way of doing this for any and every job. They could even do it so that you need more light for the first step, less light for the second step. And then, of course, have tomes as an option. Not saying you can't have them, just only as an option. I just want to do something that isn't tomes, for the love of God. Then we have the new Deep Dungeon, which we did know we were getting in 0.3x, and it came to me as a huge surprise. This is just an explanation of what a Deep Dungeon is. We're not reading this. I'm not doing that. And we're actually going back to the first. We're going back to Ilmeg into a deep dungeon called Pilgrim's Traverse. Apparently, this one doesn't go up or down. It's more like a set of illusion rooms that the Fae have set up for us. I'm assuming that there's just a bunch of like Fae magic trickery that like makes the progression like just not linearly in like one direction. You can even go outside in it. So there's a beautiful, skyscape in that of Ilmeg. I mean, just literally straight up outdoors, and it looks beautiful. Now, they are actually doing a couple of things with it that we weren't expecting. One thing in particular. First, the normal stuff. You do need Endwalker complete and 450 of Palace of the Dead. I want to briefly talk about that. Kind of a problem nowadays to make that a requirement. I understand why it's a requirement, but there's not a lot of people doing 450 for Palace of the Dead. So I'm going to actually be doing two things. One, I'm going to do an updated 1 to 50 solo guide specifically aimed at people just looking to get through it if they're completely unfamiliar with it and just want to unlock other content. It is very easy, but if you are starting from scratch, it can definitely be intimidating. So I will be doing something of me doing 1 to 50 solo. I'm even going to strip all of my silver off, which is not something I ever thought I would do, so that I'm as weak as possible going through it, so you can get a more authentic experience. Number two, I will personally be ahead of the patch, actually just doing things on stream. I will just be helping people who do not have 450 runs through to 450. I'm going to do my part because I think that we've kind of lost sight of that as a community of trying to help people. But I also think some people just don't want to even ask other people for help with stuff like this. So I think that it's pretty important to get that through. But I really think they need to reconsider floors 1 through 50 for Palace of the Dead specifically, because it's just not something a lot of players feel comfortable even doing. And the queues for it are basically non-existent. So that's a fault. I don't agree with them continuing to make that a requirement, even if it is technically soloable. Level 91 or above to enter. Now, mind you can level in Deep Dungeon, so you can actually go from level 91 to 100. I know it's annoying it's not 90. That's how the two previous Deep Dungeons were, so they're just sticking to that 81 to 90, 91 to 100, and then also 61 to 70 for Heaven on High. I think Palace of the Dead does like 15 through 60. So, quite a bit different. That being said, you can use this as leveling content, and generally there are some designated floors that are really good for that. And then you can actually queue in by speaking to an NPC in Ilmeg. Now, the new feature is a bonus duty after completing all 100 floors. A harder version of the floor 99 boss battle will be accessible from the dungeon entrance NPC and can be challenged at level 100 with a party of 4. We did not get any word about variant or criterion in this patch, but we basically were given a Savage Mode version of the the floor 99. I expect this to be very similar to criterion difficulty with just the single boss, and that it'll probably be a pretty quick prog. The question is, what will the rewards be? And that's something we're going to be keeping our eye on, because in a 0.3x patch, little hard to try to incentivize those properly, and it's designed for a party of 4. This does not seem to be a solo endeavor that people can take on. So very curious to see how that will pan out and what the difficulty will look like. And now they wanted to keep the boss largely a secret, but from this screenshot, we can see one of the Sin Eaters. Now, some people have pointed out that looks like Forgiven Obscenity, I believe her name is, in Mount Golg. It's also very reminiscent to one of the Roll Quest NPCs. So given the history of what happened in that castle, if you know the lore, it's kind of messed up. It might be kind of diving back into a little bit about all of the void transformations that happened and maybe what happened to some of the people in Ilmeg when the Wave of Light actually, well, as people started to train, because you got to remember that even Titania was a Light Warden at some point. So it's possible that there's some, maybe left some presents for anyone else who came after in the basement or whatever through the Pilgrim's Traverse travel area. So, you know, curious. Now, they were going to talk about system updates, but they had an announcement about Ultimate. There is no Ultimate in 7.3. I have been calling it for a long time that there would be no Ultimate in 7.3. There's a lot of reasons for that, but the number one reason is that they have wanted to get away from the 0.3 because of player feedback. For those of you who aren't around, when Shadowbringers came out, and in fact, even before Shadowbringers came out, people were saying, the Ultimate Raiders specifically, hey, you should do Ultimate in 0.5 to help bridge the gap between the end of the expansion and the beginning of the next expansion. It's a generally better period. I don't wholly agree with that opinion. I think it makes sense, but you can just do the 0.1 and 0.3 Ultimates throughout 0.5, and generally the average player is not just blasting through the Ultimates at 0.1, 0.3. So, you know, whatever. Besides the point. It was a common piece of feedback. They tried to do that in Shadowbringers, but everything shutting down globally kind of made that hard. So they had to make the difficult decision to make DSR 6.1 and then top in 6.3. Because top was in 6.3 and was no doubt originally planned for 6.1 at some point, people went back to assuming we will only ever get 0.1 and 0.3 Ultimates. But that's never been the case. Like, they already tried to do a 0.5. It obviously gives people fear that maybe there won't be an Ultimate at all in this expansion. They are working on the next one. They confirmed that after Fru was done, but they did not say when. They said there will be a next Ultimate, but it will not be in 0.3. That does not mean there will be an Ultimate in 0.5. It also doesn't mean that there won't be an Ultimate in 0.5. Double negative. So this is a matter of waiting. I personally don't care. I'll just do it when it comes out. I'll do the deep dungeons. I'll do the treasure dungeon, whatever. But with this as a whole, we've covered largely the content portion. Now, part 2 could still have surprises. I'm not banking on anything major. I mean, Chaotic was a pretty big surprise when we heard about that, though. So they just kind of snuck that one in there at some point. But then this raises the question of the overall content structure. We have the obvious new MSQ, new dungeon, new Unreal, new trial, new extreme trial. We have the new treasure dungeon. We have cosmic exploration. We have deep dungeon. We have the bonus deep dungeon boss. And then the individual little stories. You have Hildibrand. You have the crafting tribe. All that spread throughout 0.3x. The question is that content sufficient without Occult Crescent seeing a major update? It is seeing an update, but I would not call it a major one in terms of getting people to go in there more. And no variant or criterion or anything of that. I'd say it's largely up to your tastes. By the time 0.3 comes around, it's normally the apex point of the patch, or if you haven't played since 0.0, it's kind of the ideal time to come back. You can get into all of those things, catch up with the story, get the finale of Dawn Trail, and it'll work out really well. But it's going to be down to if these are features that interest you. A lot of people were waiting for another leveling method, so Deep Dungeon will probably be interesting for that if they do it correctly. I'm a bit concerned. Eureka Orthos was really sluggish at the beginning. That can't happen here. We need something that feels good. Something like Palace of the Dead 51 to 60 or Heaven on High 21 to 30 to kind of be the average pace for the first 30 floors, and then for things to gradually get slower as you climb up all the way to 100, which a lot of people won't do, but maybe we'll do a little bit more with the Duty Recorder. It's just a matter of how much these individual bits and bobs interest you. Will the next Cosmic update be any better? Will the story be more engaging and be something that players want to engage with more? Are there other features that you are looking forward to? Or are there any surprise features in the patch notes that generally attract people? That's where we get into the system updates, because the system updates were full of a lot of, hey, this is currently being worked on. Chat bubble. A lot of people waiting on the chat bubble. I personally am not a fan. I find them obtrusive. I don't want them on, but that's why it's an option. That's the beauty of options. The people who want them can have them. And let me tell you, they probably already do. And the people who don't. Very simple. This has been something they've been talking about for a while. It is currently under active development. More specifically, they are basically done developing the feature, but the actual implementation and QA of it needs to be done. So they didn't say in particular when this was coming out, while it is in the what's to come in patch 7.3 slide and doesn't have a date technically. We just don't know enough. It's too ambiguous of wording for me to say it is or it isn't in 0.3. It just didn't feel solid enough, even though it doesn't have a date and it doesn't say, I don't know. They're just reconfirming that chat bubbles is currently being worked on. And then they go over a whole bunch of things. Like, we knew you could turn it on or off for chat modes. You could, chat bubble and font color can be set to turning it on and off in battle, all sorts of things. Like, and then they make a few funny memes about the dead body yelling for healer LB3 off the ground. And then there are some decent mid-battle applications. For general use, though, I won't use it in battle. It's an option at the very least, so that if somebody communicates something, it's on your screen and you don't have to read the chat. Especially useful if you're in the PF, although I think the PF will probably take the chat bubble feature a little too far, if you catch my drift, in terms of its application, if you understand. It's going to really plug into the raid scene. You might be thinking that's already happened, but it's going to get more. Anyway. Now also, they're expanding the number of headgear support options for Hrothgar and Viera. They only showed a few of the options, and it's not an entire list, but they showed, just some hats on these Hrothgar. Got the cowboy hat, the wizard hat, and then you got the sleeping cap and the little cap, the little hat on the left. Couldn't remember the name. You can also toggle whether or not you want the ears to actually pop through, which is weird because you basically turn a Viera into a Here when you turn it off. But yeah, that's just another option. Who cares? It's an option, right? Options. I would say options are good. If you really just don't like your ears, maybe it just doesn't match your outfit. Who knows? But why are you playing Viera in that case? Who knows? Maybe you've gaslit yourself into thinking that you know what? Actually, I don't want my ears to go through. I would rather that not happen. I'm sure for some outfits, people are going to do that. But yeah, they are expanding. Another thing that they're doing is they're making it so that bangs actually appear when you have hoods on. So this is what it looks like now if you have a hood up and you have bangs on your character. And that's what it looks like after. This honestly garnished almost more excitement than the Viera Hrothgar thing, because the weirdness of turning them on and off and not being a comprehensive list obviously always pulls away a little bit of the excitement. This, on the other hand, something that applies to pretty much everyone and is pretty easy to see visually, and it's just adding to something that was already there versus something that's still kind of in the works and is not all the way implemented. We did also get news about the raid planner. And again, with chat bubbles, and it said in development, it didn't say whether or not it was 7.3 or onward. They just said in active development. So it's kind of confusing. This very clearly states the raid planner will not be ready till 7.4 or later. In the last patch cycle, up to 7.2, they explained that the reason the raid planner is taking a really long time is because they actually want it to be competitive with what's already out there. They said if they just wanted to release it as is, and it served a very basic purpose, they could have just thrown it in the game at any point. It was basically done ages ago. But then they looked at the way that raid plans are actually used, the sharing, the amount of information, the customization, and determined it simply would have been abandoned as soon as it launched. And it's a genuine concern because I thought it was going to be abandoned at launch unless it could literally compete with all of the systems in place. We do get a little bit of a better peek at it. We can see a circular arena with the ability to customize different parts, label the different jobs. Heck, we even get a brief look at this is an M5S raid plan right here for one of the frog tirages near the end. And you can see all the different aspects to it, the customization on the left and the right, as well as the AoEs that are pointing out. So you can really do, that's a pretty good representation of what that should look like for M5S. Now, while that looks okay, and you're like, oh, well, if you got that, you could probably release it. Things that are currently under consideration, meaning that reasons why it's not out yet, basically. Functionality to display the board where desired, including during battle. That is huge. That is probably the biggest reason to have this raid plan and to make it be functional. One of the two biggest reasons, I think. A lot of people pull up diagrams on their phone, on a second monitor. That's how they do it. And when right before the mechanic, while they're progging, they'll glance over and be like, okay, if I get this, I go there. And maybe even like while the mechanic is going, they'll glance over as they learn it. Or maybe you just only raid once a week. You're a raid logger and you just forget like what strat you're doing, or you want to update strat. Whatever. Having it on screen in the game is a majorly important bit. So yeah, they definitely want to do that. Option to highlight specific jobs. That has some functionality. I think that's a nice thing to have, but isn't like the most make or break reason to delay it. Ability to set up multiple schemes for a single duty. So the way that it seems to be programmed initially in their current development is you have a duty and you have all the diagrams for that duty, but you can only have one set of diagrams basically. So if there's a different strategy or you want to make changes, you can only make changes to the one scheme and not like save it and then make another one and be like, scheme 1, scheme 2. So this is good. PF does sometimes have multiple strats, especially here in North America. So being able to pull up Hector versus Raid Plan versus like whatever else, Brain Dead, whatever, having the ability to pull up whichever one your PF has is pretty important. And then honestly, not under consideration, this is mandatory. Option to share. This needs to literally be baked into every aspect of this. If you have to leave the game to share it, it's immediately a failure, in my opinion. The whole functionality of this is I can click on a PF, they can give me the raid plan in-game through the PF, and then I have it as a reference. It is literally the most core thing that needs to be done. Hell, when you open a PF, you should be able to upload the raid plan to the PF listing, and then when you open the PF, pops up that says a raid plan was attached. Would you like to load this raid plan? Like something like that needs to happen. Like even in like a temporary slot, like a PF slot in the UI or something like that. So yeah, no, that's not optional. If that is not there, it is a failure in my opinion. Especially because console players is a main targeting aspect of these functions as a whole. And that was kind of it for the live letter in terms of brand new stuff. They do briefly talk about how the kind of TARDIS housing, they'll talk about more in part 2. Don't know if that means it's in 7.3 or not, but the TARDIS housing was something we've been waiting on for quite some time as well. For announcements, I'm not going to go into it because we got to go back to the first half of the live letter, but like there's a Summer Festival of Light, some cookies, some Scree cookies, Moogle cookies, the Alpha No and Alice earrings, which are like $400. Some stickers, Yan. There's a Yan sticker. That's all you really needed to see. And a Doman Mahjong shirt with like the hardest hand to get imaginable. Here's them just showing off the stickers, the shirt. There's a pop-up store that's going to be in Daimara Umeda store and in some dates, and then a Daimaru Tokyo store and another one. Reminder of the camping collaboration they showed us last time. A new Chronicles of Light volume. These are the short stories that we've seen the tales of stories on the Lodestone, and it has 4 newer stories as well. It will have a digital and physical release later this year. Custom photo book, the Memories of Light 10% campaign. I forgot they even did this, but they're doing a discount campaign for it. They're hiring battle content designers, scenario designers, graphics engineers, web planners, and then a quote career opportunity. I don't know if that's different from this, but it's there. They also announced that all of their Primals Dark Decades tour is sold out, but they are adding another date to one of the most prestigious musical venues in all of Japan, and that of Nippon Budokan. Obviously, they've already performed in the Tokyo Dome, but Budokan, as Soken puts it, is special. They will have Jason Charles Miller there. They will have the CD full of Arcadian songs, and the Arcadian will be part of the set list there. And then they talk about, can you do M7 Live? Then they briefly advertise that Final Fantasy 16 is available on Xbox, and Tactics Remake is coming later. They also showed the Logos lore book for Final Fantasy 16, which they teased on socials not too long ago. And then that was a wrap for that. So now let's double back. We actually need to go back to beyond when we started, because that was only the second half of the live letter. The first half of the live letter was actually entirely about Occult Crescent and Cosmic Exploration feedback. So they first started with the Occult Crescent feedback, largely aimed at Fork Tower and some other elements as well. And most of them kind of, I won't say they addressed everything, but they are doing things I didn't think they would do. And they are making changes to their content plans for the second zone in 7.5x that should better reflect what the overall player base can interact with and not just the hardcore. I'll get to it when we get to it. So in the problem with instance prog, or island gotcha as it's referred to, basically the problem in that groups of up to 48 have to kind of gamble queuing into an instance together, and if they all don't get into the same instance, they leave. This is going to be a buff to the Discord groups, because you are now going to be able to queue all into the same instance with up to 48 players in a single party, basically adopting the Delubrum Regine Savage queue and allowing you to just all get into the same instance every time. So no more island gotcha, no more instance prog. So for the Discord groups, it's going to be much, much easier in order to get into these things. That also means, by the way, if you're someone who wants to get into this content and you are worried about aspects like this and the time consumption that can come with it, that as of 7.3, you will have no problem. You won't have to worry about maybe waiting an hour and worrying about all that. There are other concerns, but they do lightly address that later. So 7.3 is when that will happen. And from this point onward, you will be required for every player to put in a cipher. If you wish to enter, a cipher will be required. I think that's fine. Ciphers are very easy to farm, especially with some of the other changes that they're making. Farming a cipher while even just waiting for Fork Tower's entry to appear is about to get a whole lot easier. Obviously, you can put in more ciphers, and they're even adding a list that will show who has put in a cipher. So you'll know if someone in your party has not contributed, and which means they won't get their entry. And you can also see if somebody who isn't part of your pre-made has registered, in which case pre-mades nowadays are kind of just leaving space for a few extra people to come in and sort of trying to integrate them into the run instead of treating them like annoying outsiders, which is definitely the preferred way to do it. It's better to try to integrate them, try to make sure they understand the core components. I've even had some people, I think in State of the Realm last week, somebody said they brought in a first timer who had never done it, but they studied a lot and they actually got them a clear. So it can happen. If you're someone who's really diligent like that, it can happen. Now, I wish there was a normal and savage version of Fork Tower. They said the reason for them not doing this was cost. Now, cost is not necessarily money. It's manpower and time. So it's just the overall cost effectiveness of it going into it was not very high. That being said, for the future instances of Occult Crescent, we will try to have both a normal and savage version. So in Forked Tower Magic, you should have a CLL equivalent that everyone can do, pops up on the map, and a version that the hardcore raiders can go into with the death-defying mechanic, where you only have those 3 extra lives. So that's good to hear. Already 2 major points have been hit on, although obviously everyone would like to see Fork Tower Blood also get that CLL equivalent. That doesn't seem likely. I don't think they're going to be doing that, but it's a lesson for the future, a lesson that would hopefully carry into other field ops as well. There's criticism about Magic Pot and Happy Bunny coffers. People said they feel like they've missed the mark, and the team is discussing how to change that. They were worrying maybe they just over-rewarded people before, but the answer is actually a lot simpler than that. In Eureka, the bunnies gave logograms whenever you didn't get one of the rare rewards. Logograms are incredibly valuable within that content, so much so that protective logograms are still 50k plus a pop on some servers. So because of that, because they had some logograms that were locked into largely being obtainable through bunnies, people didn't miss getting Eldthers or getting any of like the hairstyle or emote. They didn't miss those as much. Whereas here, because you're not obtaining a currency that's specific to the zone, you don't really feel as good doing it. There are some ways they could improve this. Even if they give you materia, giving you silver coins could actually be a pretty good alternative. So you get the silver coins for completing the actual magic pot thing, and then you also get silver coins for actually finding the chest. I think that would be a really nice way for them to add to it without actually needing to go too crazy on the rewards and making the materia not feel as bad at the same time. Carrots too, if you happen to have a carrot, then sure, you can get a whole bunch. They might as well just give you a ton of silver coins for the carrots, given the rarity of them, because I don't think they're going to actually be increasing the commonality of the carrot itself. Enemies and fates being defeated too quickly. They are going to be sort of making adjustments to it. They don't want it to find like too bad of a spot. There's a few solutions. I think they could add a 30-second invincibility timer to the start of a fate, and then kind of keep their scaling similar to the way they are now, but make them worth more silver. That is, obviously, that's a little bit of a nerf overall still to the way that we acquire them, even with the buff to silver on top of it. But they don't seem to be implying they're going to do that. They're just going to work on the actual parameters that determine the health. And they even acknowledge that it's difficult to adjust when an instance is crowded to when it's nearly empty. The way that it's calculated is pretty weird overall, taking into account not only the number of people in the zones, but how many people are actually nearby when it spawns and not dynamically as people enter its range. So if they work on that, there's definitely a solution to be found. Please increase the drop rate for Demi-Atma and Soul Shards. He just said get luckier. He said that the CE drop rate is 20% and the Fate drop rate is 5%. People think that's nonsense, but let me tell you, how many of you have done a 5% overmeld and lost like 80 materia? It doesn't happen every time. Maybe sometimes you lose 20. Maybe sometimes you don't lose any and you're just like, oh, thank goodness. But RNG is a fickle mistress. So this is literally like right now we're leaving it as is and we'll probably increase the drop rate at some point in the future, but it's still early. They're not going to buff it. They think, and this is actually an important thing. We obviously want to keep random drops as a feature in a game. Yet random drops are not an inherently bad feature. It sucks to go unlucky sometimes, but it also feels good to get lucky other times. So there's kind of like a mix of feelings in there that you have to measure. Some people point out that they could always do a Demi-Atma exchange. Sorry, phone went off. That they could do a Demi-Atma exchange, for example, where if you get like 3 extras of like one of the other ones, you can exchange them. I think that's a fair thing, still kind of adhering to the RNG, but adding a bit of a mercy into it. I think that's a perfectly fair piece of feedback. And yeah, but basically for this one, they're not undoing it. It's a very MMO thing to have these drop rates. And at the end of the day, it's a one-time grind. So they're kind of just like, you know, get over it for the time being. The window for Auroral Mirages, that is the weather that allows entry into the Fork Tower, is too short. Make it impossible to get there if you're in a critical encounter. Yeah, a critical encounter usually takes 4 to 5 minutes, and you have 5 minutes for Auroral Mirages. So what they're doing now is Auroral Mirages cannot happen while a critical engagement is currently on the map. So Auroral Mirages is always just about 30 minutes after an instance opens. If there's a CE up at that time, it won't spawn until the CE is done. But once the CE is done, it will immediately basically take into effect, probably within the next 60 seconds. So I mentioned earlier that requiring a cipher is not so bad. It's because you have 30 minutes in an instance before Fork Tower can even occur. So technically, you do a few CEs, 3 CEs really, plus any fates, and you're actually at a net positive of silver. So you get enough to get a single cipher plus a net positive. So that's why this is the whole needing a cipher every time thing should realistically be a non-issue, unless you just really don't want to do the content. And also gold farming is insanely quick. So that's not even factoring in how quick gold farming can be as long as you have a handful of the pretty decent jobs. Even if you're doing it solo, you can actually get about 2 or 3 ciphers per hour solo on some jobs. So there's that as well. They're also talking about how I think there's like a hot fix on Monday or something to fix some of the translation errors on the final boss. Literally, the final boss of Fork Tower has a translation issue where it's the same name for both casts. And both casts, it's kind of like an in-out mechanic in a sense. Really bad mechanic to have that on, especially in Forked Tower of all places. Then we go, okay, so that was it for Occult Crescent for the feedback for that. Moving onward, they talked about Cosmic Exploration. Can you allow us to use mounts? Yes. 7.3, you'll be able to use them right away. That is going to change the balance a little bit of the way missions have to be done. Obviously, gathering missions, the travel speed pretty important. That being said, people will feel better about having mounts. So you will have the Cosmic Sprint if you don't feel like mounting or it's a really short distance. But even just looking at red alerts, some of the runs from where the point is back to where the objective needs to be turned in, that should also feel a lot better. Please increase the time limit for missions. They said gatherers ask about this, and they're going to make some adjustments. That is not the most important adjustment for gatherers, though. Please make the mission report window open automatically. Yoshi P says, yeah, you're right. That should have been there from the start. We'll make that a thing in the future. Please make it so your GP is fully restored after completing gatherer missions. From now on, not meaning right this second, but from the next one, you will get back GP that you used, and cast timers for cordials will be reset. I didn't even think about the resetting cordial timer when I was thinking about how to improve the gathering missions. That's massive, because having a cordial available is honestly like you kind of need it for a lot of the high tier missions. So that's going to make the gathering missions feel a lot better. It's going to put them on parity with the crafting missions, where obviously CP resets after every craft. So you never have to worry about stuff like that. So having them on parity should really help the pacing of your progression on pretty much all the jobs across the board. So big fan of that. Make it easier to understand when sequential missions happen, and please make projects easier to successfully complete. Sequential missions, they are going to be improving the visibility of them, so you actually know they exist, which most people didn't. And also, they're looking at the project data and trying to decide. We're working on a system that allows for a sort of a follow-up to a failed project. I think a big thing is you can't cancel red alerts if a project fails either. Yes, making it easier is important, but in the case that it still fails, the extra punishment just for not having enough population to do it at the time, especially like what if it's at like 4 in the morning, right? Like there's problems with that. So at the very least, there needs to be some assessment of when the project is taking place. Maybe a 30-minute timer, quite frankly, isn't enough. Maybe they should make it so that when the progress bar fills, only certain times of the day it can actually trigger times of day where they determine that it's generally more player dense, not necessarily just peak time, but more player dense than like the 2 or 3 a.m. So something like that would also be really handy in my opinion. Please keep the relative positioning of shops and NPCs constant as the base develops. There's icons on the minimap. I don't care, but yeah, sure. Keep it consistent. It's feedback. They said that they'll do it. Also, the holograms will be installed from the beginning. They won't have to be earned up to a certain point. And also they want to look at incentives. Looking at player data is clear that incentives to keep playing after you finish your tool and the rewards are lacking. They will improve it. This is very true. Now, to be fair, you could say that about any content in the game, right? I beat it and I got all the rewards. Why would I do it more? Like, duh, yeah, like that's how everything ever works in any game. Like, outside of just like really loving RNG grinds, like, I don't know, or just trying to challenge yourself to specific things, that's a pretty normal thing. But I do agree that specifically with the type of content this is, and the type of content we've had before, we know it's possible and they can do it. So I'm glad to see that, because I definitely was feeling like after I finished my last tool, I was like, okay, I'm gonna put this down for now. And I think also the 500k mount being a reskin probably didn't help. Maybe they'll have other mounts that are also point related in the future, but we'll just have to wait and see. Retainer bell. They're adding a retainer bell. Simple. Please make it easier to get to the base. Yeah, this is weird. It's not like it's hard to get to the base. Honestly, they just put driving way too far. Like, because it's so symmetrical by the Aetheryte, sometimes I'll go the wrong direction, even though he's always in the same spot. Sometimes I'll just like zone in and go the wrong direction. Just don't put him at the bottom of that little hill. Just move him closer. Like, they're talking about adding an Aetheryte ticket that teleports you right to driving way, so you don't have to go to Best Way Burrows and then walk over. But that's probably going to cost tokens from the moon, I would assume, that I don't want to spend on that. So just put him closer to the Aetheryte? I don't know. I don't feel like that's a wild suggestion. So, yeah. Also, they said they've had feedback about deleted comments on the forums. As a community team, we will be moderating the forum when it gets too heated, and insults will be deleted from now on as well. Yeah, I mean, they're basically just saying that when people mouth off on the forums and they're, let's say, a little too passionate, yeah, they get deleted. I'm not surprised. I don't post on the forums. From what I understand, it's pretty easy to get your comments deleted or to get banned from the forums. But I feel like every time someone says, I didn't deserve it, they probably did. I feel like every time this happens, it's always worse than they make it seem. because they're just kind of used to talking a certain way. So it's really hard to find the middle ground when it comes to that one. But yeah, I would imagine that this is not exactly something they love having on the forums as a whole. And that covers the first half. So yeah, those are the pieces of feedback for the Occult Crescent and for Cosmic Exploration. I keep wanting to call it Crescent Exploration because I'm stupid. And for all the new content coming at 7.3. There is the Part 2 live letter. It will probably be about 5 weeks from the day that this is happening. That's the general pattern. That's 9 or 10 days before the next patch. 9 or 10 days for the next patch. Next patch is August 5th. Just work backwards from there. And there may be a few surprises in there. We'll be seeing more about the Deep Dungeon. We'll be learning more about the TARDIS feature. We'll be seeing kind of peeks and previews of things like Final Fantasy XI. Not the Trial series, because they said that has to stay a secret. And yeah, curious to see, because if you look at the patch as a whole, yes, there's some cool new things. It's nice to be kind of wowed by, you know, the mystery of the story and wanting to see its finale and loving Hildibrand. But unless you're a big Deep Dungeon or Cosmic Exploration fan, or you're someone who plans on spending a lot of time there for any reason whatsoever, it's not like a super dense patch. There's a lot of content in Dawn Trail that we're still in the dark about. Beastmaster, we were told would be late Dawn Trail, so I'm guessing 0.5x. The Blue Mage level 90 update still up for grabs. Variant and Criterion still up for grabs. We don't know if we're getting the second Ultimate at this point. And there's something else I'm forgetting. And we have to wait till 0.55 for the Occult Crescent. We have the Cosmic Exploration every patch. There's something else I'm forgetting. Obviously, there's another Savage tier, another Alliance raid. I feel like there's something else I'm forgetting at some point. I don't know. But either way, we'll just have to see how it goes. We'll have to see if Part 2 gives us any surprises that will kind of ease the tensions on that one. Or if we're going to be looking at 14 mobile, like Penguin event. When are we getting that? But anyway, that's going to be a wrap for my overview on live letter number 87 for Final Fantasy XIV. Let me know what you think in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Probably some discussion videos to be had. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Take care.